The last thing I heard before the doors closed was my sister laughing. Not a small laugh, a full, head-thrown-back laugh, the kind she saved for when something genuinely delighted her. And what delighted her that afternoon was the look on my face. Standing in the middle of a Petro-Canada parking lot, somewhere between Barrie and Sudbury, holding a half-eaten granola bar, and watching my family's minivan pull back onto Highway 400. I remember the exact moment I understood they weren't coming back. The van slowed at the exit of the rest stop, and for 1 second, maybe 2, I thought my stepfather was going to put it in reverse. I actually raised my hand, like I was hailing a bus. That's how stupid I felt standing there. He didn't reverse, he turned right. And then they were gone. My name is Joelle. I was 31 years old. I had no phone, $47 in my jacket pocket, and absolutely no idea where I was. This is the story I never planned to tell anyone. I need to go back a bit, because if I just describe that parking lot, you'll think my family was cartoonishly evil, and the truth is more complicated than that. And somehow worse. I grew up in Hamilton, Ontario, the second of 3 kids. My older sister, Renee, had always been the one who set the tone in our house. She's 4 years older than me and she had a talent, she still does, for making cruelty seem like humor. Any time she said something that genuinely stung, there was always a punchline attached, a grin, a relax, I'm kidding. And because my stepfather thought Renee was the funniest person alive, and because my mother had long ago learned that it was easier to laugh along than to push back. I grew up in a house where being the butt of a joke was just called being part of the family. I don't think I understood how much that shaped me until I was standing in that parking lot with the wind off Georgian Bay cutting through my jacket in October. The trip itself had started in Hamilton. My mother and stepfather were driving Renee and her husband. This man named Glenn who laughed at everything Renee said, always half a second too late, like he was checking her face before committing. Up to a cottage near Parry Sound, a family weekend. My stepfather had booked it months ago and my mother had called me 3 times to make sure I was coming. It'll be good, she said. We haven't all been together since Christmas. I should have said no. I want to be clear about that. I was 31 years old and I should have been able to say, I can't make it this time, and leave it at that. But there's something about certain families that makes the word no feel like detonating a bomb. You spend so much energy managing everyone's reactions that it's sometimes easier to just go. So I went. The drive north started fine. I was in the back row of the minivan next to my overnight bag. Renee was in the middle row with Glenn, and my mother was in the passenger seat running through some kind of mental checklist about whether she'd packed the right coffee. My stepfather drove and said almost nothing, which was normal. He communicated mostly through sighs and the occasional exhale that meant he disagreed with whatever had just been said. Renee started somewhere around Innisfil. It was a bit, she explained. She'd been listening to some podcast about social experiments. She said this like it gave the idea academic weight, and she'd had an idea. What if we left Joelle at the next rest stop, she said, just for a few minutes, to see what she'd do. I heard her say it, but my brain didn't process it as a real proposal. I thought she was describing some story she'd heard. Like, we drive away, she continued, wait around the corner, and see how long it takes her to panic. Glenn laughed, on time for once. My mother turned around. I looked at her, fully expecting her to shut it down. She had this expression on her face that I can only describe as amused consideration, like she was thinking it over. Joelle freaks out about everything, Renee said. She'd probably cry within 30 seconds. I'm right here, I said. That's the point, Renee said. My stepfather made a sound from the driver's seat. I think it was supposed to be a chuckle. I put in my earbuds. I told myself they were joking. This was what they always did, floated increasingly uncomfortable ideas and watched to see if you'd react. If you reacted, you were too sensitive. If you didn't react, the idea quietly got dropped. I'd learned to run out the clock. We stopped at a rest stop north of Barrie, one of those Ontario highway stops with a Tim Hortons inside and a row of transport trucks idling along the far edge of the lot. It was cold, properly October cold, and the sky had that gray flannel look that means rain is coming. I got out to use the washroom. I took my jacket but left my bag in the van. Why would I take my bag? We were stopping for 15 minutes. I left my phone on the seat because the cord was plugged in and my battery had been dying all morning. I came out of the building with a medium double-double. Took me maybe 8 minutes total. The van was not where I had left it. I stood there for a moment, genuinely confused. I thought maybe my stepfather had moved to a different spot. I walked the lot once, then twice. I found the spot where we'd parked. There was still a coffee cup on the ground that had rolled out when Renee opened her door. I stood there and I raised my hand. And that's when I understood. The first 10 minutes were mostly just shock. I kept thinking there must be a version of this where it's fine. Maybe they drove around the corner like Renee said. Maybe they were filming me on a phone and waiting to see my face. I stood near the entrance of the Tims for a while, because it seemed like the logical place to wait. People came and went. Nobody looked at me. I was just a woman standing near a building in October, which in Canada is not a remarkable sight. After about 15 minutes I went inside. I still had my jacket and my $47. I ordered another coffee because my hands were cold and I needed something to hold. I asked the woman behind the counter if I could borrow her phone. She looked at me with the wariness of someone who gets asked for things a lot, but she handed it over. I called my mother's number from memory, one of maybe 3 phone numbers I actually knew by heart. Straight to voicemail. I called Renee's number. I wasn't even sure I had it right, but I tried. It rang 4 times and then nothing. I handed the phone back. The woman asked if I was okay. I said yes, thank you. I don't know why I said yes. I sat in the Tim Hortons for probably 40 minutes. I drank my coffee. I tried to think clearly. Here is what I knew. I was at a highway rest stop somewhere north of Barrie. I did not have my phone or my bag. I had $47. The temperature outside was about 4 degrees and falling. There was a Tim Hortons, a Shell station, and a lot full of transport trucks. Here is what I kept pushing away. The possibility that they weren't coming back at all. Not that day anyway. I don't want to make this sound like more than it was in that first hour. I was not in immediate danger. I was inside a heated building. I wasn't stranded in the wilderness. But there is something about being left, deliberately, as a joke, that does something to your chest that has nothing to do with the temperature outside. It sits there, and it presses. I thought about my mother turning around in the passenger seat with that expression on her face. Amused consideration. That's the part I keep coming back to. A man named Walter. He was wearing a Carhartt jacket with a local plumbing company logo on the chest, was sitting 2 tables over, and he'd apparently noticed me trying to make the phone call. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he got up to refill his coffee, and on his way back he stopped. "You need a ride somewhere?" I looked at him. He was probably 60, with the kind of face that gets weathered from working outside for 30 years. He didn't seem threatening. He seemed like someone's father. "I don't know where I'm going yet," I said. He nodded like that was a reasonable answer. He sat back down and didn't push it. About 10 minutes later he came back over and put his phone on the table open to a map. "There's a town about 12 kilometers south," he said. "Not much there, but there's a motel and a diner. If you're figuring things out, that might be a better place to figure them out than here." I asked him why he was being helpful. I didn't say it rudely. I genuinely wanted to understand. He picked his phone back up. "My daughter is about your age," he said. "And I'd want someone to point her to a diner." He didn't offer me a ride. He didn't ask what happened. He just gave me the information and let me decide what to do with it. I think about that a lot, actually. The way he offered exactly enough and nothing more. I thanked him. He went back to his table. I sat with the map image in my head for a few minutes. 12 kilometers wasn't far. In good weather on a clear road, it was walkable. It was October, the rain hadn't started yet, and I had a jacket. I started walking at about 2 in the afternoon. I want to tell you the walk was clarifying, that the cold air and the physical movement gave me some kind of perspective. And it did, eventually, but not right away. For the first kilometer or so, I was just angry in that flat, quiet way that lives underneath the louder anger. Not the anger you yell. The anger you carry. I thought about Renee saying she'd probably cry within 30 seconds. I thought about my stepfather's exhale from the driver's seat, the sound that was technically not a yes but that said yes. I thought about how many times I had run out the clock. The rain started somewhere around the 4-kilometer mark. Not heavy, not yet, but that thin, persistent Ontario rain that gets into everything. I had no umbrella. I pulled my jacket tighter and kept going. A truck slowed beside me at some point. A pickup, newer, one of those F-150s, and the window came down. A woman behind the wheel, maybe mid-40s, her hair pulled back, asked where I was heading. I told her about the diner. "Get in," she said. It wasn't exactly an offer. It was more like an instruction. She didn't pry either. She asked if I was visiting from somewhere. I said I was from Hamilton. She said she'd gone to school in Burlington, which is close enough that we talked about the lakeshore for a few minutes. And that was it. She dropped me at the diner, told me the fish and chips on Fridays were actually very good, and pulled back out onto the road. 2 strangers in one afternoon had treated me more gently than my family had in 31 years. I'm not being dramatic about that. That's just the arithmetic of that day. The diner was the kind of place that has a name on the sign outside, and a completely different name that everyone actually calls it, based on whoever owned it longest. It was warm and it smelled like coffee and something with gravy, and the woman at the counter had the easy efficiency of someone who had worked that room for decades. I sat at the counter. I ordered soup because it was the cheapest thing on the menu, and I was conscious of my $47. The counterwoman, her name tag said Bev, brought the soup and then stood there for a moment. "Rough afternoon?" she asked. "Something like that." She poured me a coffee without asking. I didn't protest. I sat there for a long time. The dinner rush came and went. It was a small dinner rush, maybe 6 tables at peak, and Bev kept refilling my coffee and didn't seem to resent that I was nursing one bowl of soup for 90 minutes. At some point she came and sat on the stool at the end of the counter that was clearly where she sat when things were slow. "You figuring something out?" she asked. "Trying to," I said. "We've got a phone," she said. "Actual landline. You can use it." I called my mother again. This time it rang. 3 times, 4, and then she picked up. "Joelle." Her voice was careful. I asked, "We're at the cottage." A pause. "Are you okay?" I want to be fair to this part of the conversation. I think my mother in that moment was genuinely asking if I was okay. I think she had spent the last several hours in some uncomfortable space between having thought this was funny and now being worried, and I think she was hoping I would say yes and make it easier for everyone. "I'm at a diner," I said. "I have $47 and no phone." "Joelle, it was just a bit of fun. We were going to come back. You didn't come back." Silence. "We thought you'd call," she said finally. "I didn't have a phone. It was in the van." Another silence. "Renee thought." I know what Renee thought. I stopped. I took a breath. "I need you to come get me, or I need money in my account so I can get home." I heard her speak quietly to someone. My stepfather, probably. There was a muffled exchange I couldn't make out. "We can come get you in the morning," she said. "It's getting dark in the roads." "In the morning," I repeated. "It's not that far a drive from Mom." I stopped again. I looked at the soup bowl in front of me and the coffee and the laminated menu with its Friday fish and chips special. "Don't come in the morning, just send me enough for a bus or a train and I'll get myself home." She was quiet for a moment. "Are you angry?" I think about that question a lot. Are you angry? As if my emotional state was the most important variable in the room. As if the real problem here was whether I was going to be difficult about it. "Send me $200, I said, "to my account, and I'll get home on my own." She sent $300. It came through on Bev's phone, which she let me use to check. 40 minutes later. My stepfather must have done it quietly. He didn't call. I booked a seat on a morning coach from the town's small transit connection. It took Bev's help to find the schedule and the stop, which was apparently a gas station 2 blocks over. And I thanked her for the soup, and the coffee, and the phone. She charged me for the soup. She didn't charge me for the coffee. "You come back sometime when things are better," she said. I told her I would. I meant it. I got a room at the motel up the street for $92 plus tax. It was small, and smelled faintly of someone else's shampoo, and the heater made a clicking sound all night. I lay on top of the covers for a long time without sleeping. I want to tell you about what I thought about in that motel room, because I think this is the part that matters. For most of my life I had arranged myself around my family's comfort. I had run out the clock on 1,000 uncomfortable moments. I had laughed along when I didn't find things funny. I had driven north to a cottage I didn't want to go to because saying no felt like detonating a bomb. And I had spent so much energy on this, on the managing, the anticipating, the careful calibration of how to be in a room with these people, that I had sort of stopped noticing how tired it had made me. Lying in that motel room, I thought, they drove away. They drove away and parked somewhere and waited to see what I would do, and the word for that is not a prank. The word for that is contempt. You do not do that to someone you respect, regardless of whether you come back. I thought about the way my mother had said, "Are you angry?" Like my anger was the problem to be managed. I thought about Renee's voice when she floated the idea, so casual, so certain I would be the one to make myself smaller. I had spent 31 years making myself smaller in that family. And here is the thing about making yourself smaller. You don't notice it's happening because it happens so gradually, one concession at a time, until one day you're a person who gets left at a highway rest stop, and your first instinct is to wave your hand like you're hailing a bus, hoping they'll reverse. The clicking heater eventually stopped. I slept for a few hours. The coach was early. I got to the gas station at 7 with a coffee from a convenience store, and I waited on a bench outside until the bus came at 7:40. There were 4 other people on it. None of us talked. We watched Southern Ontario slide past the windows. The fields going gray-brown for winter, the farmhouses with their long laneways, the occasional Tim Hortons at the center of a small town strip. I got back to Hamilton just after noon. My apartment was on the third floor of a building on the escarpment side of the city. I climbed the stairs, unlocked my door, and stood in my own hallway for a moment, just breathing. My phone was obviously still in the van. I borrowed my neighbor Priya's phone to call the only person I actually wanted to talk to, my friend Denise, who had known me since we were both 19 and working at the same coffee shop downtown. She came over within the hour, with a bag of groceries and a bottle of wine, and listened to the whole thing while we made pasta. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I thought about it while I drained the pasta. "I'm going to get a new phone tomorrow," I said. "And I'm going to return my mother's calls when I'm ready." "And Renee?" I put the colander down. "I'm not going to return Renee's calls." Denise nodded. She didn't press. That was a decision I had never quite managed to make before, the one where I acknowledged, without drama, that certain relationships had reached their limit. Not in a sweeping declaration, not in a speech, just quietly, while draining pasta. My mother called 3 times over the next week. I let it go to voicemail each time. On the 4th call, I picked up. She said she was sorry. She said it had gotten out of hand. She said she hadn't expected me to actually be stranded. She said Renee felt terrible, though she didn't mention Renee calling me herself, which I noticed. I told her I heard her. "Are we okay?" she asked. I thought about Bev at the diner counter, pouring coffee without being asked. I thought about the woman in the pickup who said get in like it was an instruction. I thought about Walter, who gave me exactly enough information and nothing more. "I need some time," I said. "I'll call you when I'm ready." "How much time?" "I don't know," I said. "That's kind of the point. I have not spoken to Renee. It's been several months now. There was a birthday, hers, during which I sent a card with no message, just my name, and I felt that was about right. Exactly enough. Nothing more. My stepfather sent me a text just once, in November. It said, "Glad you made it home okay." I read it 3 times. I didn't reply. What I've learned, and I keep learning it, in small ways daily, is that surviving something and making peace with it are 2 completely different things. I survived that rest stop afternoon just fine. I had $47 and a good jacket, and there were people along the road who were decent, who pointed me toward warmth, who didn't ask for anything back. Making peace with it is slower. It's the work of understanding why I got in that van in the first place, why I said yes when I meant no, why I put my earbuds in and ran out the clock instead of saying, very clearly, "That's not funny and I don't want to do that." I'm working on it. I'm actually in therapy now, with someone who keeps pointing out, gently, weakly, in a bright office near Lock Street, that the problem was never that I was too sensitive. The problem was that I was surrounded by people who had a vested interest in telling me I was. I don't know what my family makes of any of this. I don't know if they've talked about it among themselves. If it has become another bit. The time Joelle overreacted about the rest stop thing, I don't know. And I've been slowly learning that I don't need to know. What I have is my apartment on the escarpment side of the city, and Denise with her groceries, and a phone that is back in my pocket where it belongs. I have a therapist on Lock Street who tells me the truth without a punchline attached. I have the memory of a diner that smelled like coffee and gravy, and a woman named Bev who charged me for the soup and not the coffee and said come back when things are better. I'm going to go back sometime, I don't know when. But I'll go on my own terms in my own car, with a full tank of gas and my phone charged. And I won't be waving at anyone.